So the other night in Bible study, I said something that surprised even me. I said, "This is the best version of myself I've ever known, and I wish I'd met her sooner." What the what? But then two women in my group started nodding like they knew exactly what I meant. Wow. Later, I asked myself, what exactly did you mean? What was I thinking about? Because she isn't any younger, that's for sure. She doesn't have fewer problems. In fact, some things in her life right now are bigger than she can manage on her own. So, what is it that I like about her, me, right now? If we've never met, I'm Susan Price Thompson. I'm a speaker, a mentor, founder of I Can See You, and I help people move from chaos to clarity through wisdom, discernment, biblical teaching, and learning to recognize how God is already working in their lives. The more I thought about that question, the more I realized I wasn't talking about age at all. I was talking about something deeper, something that took me most of my life to recognize. So, what exactly is it that I like about her now? You know, there is a popular TV series now called The Summer I Turned Pretty. Well, I had one of those, only mine was The Summer I Turned Pretty Dorky. I mean, I was skinny as a rail, had these big giant goggle Coke bottle glasses. Kids at school called me names, including one that I'd never even heard, Pirate's Delight, because I had a sunken chest. Get it? Haha, very funny, right? Well, I also had one of the worst self-inflicted shaggy haircuts in recorded history, which may explain why some of the boys at school started following me down the hall, barking at me like dogs. I came home hurt and embarrassed, and I'll never forget what Daddy said to me. He said, "Susan, they are not telling you who you are, they're telling you who they are." Well, at the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant, but the next time it happened, instead of crying, I threw back my head and howled like a wolf at them. And guess what? It worked. The moment I stopped defending their interpretation of me, I took away some of their so-called power. Now, I know Daddy was teaching me something much more important and bigger than how to handle a few mean boys. He was teaching me something about life, because life is full of voices, labels, expectations, people telling us who we are, who we're not, who we're supposed to be. And if we're not careful, we spend years carrying that stuff around that never belonged to us in the first place. Looking back, I think Daddy changed something far more important than my feelings. He changed the lens. He helped me understand that not every voice deserves authority, and not every interpretation of me deserves to become part of my identity. I didn't fully understand that lesson then. In fact, I'm still learning it even now. Hey, if conversations like this interest you, thinking about discernment, purpose, faith, and learning to recognize what God is doing in your life, I hope you'll hit subscribe and join us every week and share with like-minded friends. Lately, I've been wondering about something. Why has it been so easy for me to see other people, but difficult to see myself? I can recognize gifts, purpose, and strength in somebody long before they see it. It's one of the reasons I can say, "I see you," and mean it. I've spent years helping people recognize things about themselves that were hiding in plain sight. But then I would try to take a selfie, or I would look in a mirror, and suddenly my vision wasn't nearly as clear. Why is that? Why is it so easy to see you and so hard to see me? Maybe because when I looked at you, I saw your hidden core and possibility. When I looked at me, I saw a core hidden by history. I had trusted and gotten hurt. I had stepped out and gotten shut down. I had taken risks and failed. Maybe that's true for all of us. In fact, I'm sure it is. Maybe that's why we can encourage other people so easily and struggle to extend that same grace to ourselves. Because when we look at someone else, we can often see who they really are beneath the fear, the protective layers, and all those stories they've been telling themselves. But when we look at ourselves, we're often looking through those layers instead of beyond them. Maybe that's why vulnerability feels so risky, because somewhere deep down we worry about what we'll find if all those layers do come off. What if the real me isn't enough? Because vulnerability is essentially like a walking prayer. Let me see and be seen and not be hurt. Show me what's true. Maybe that's why I love the prayer at the end of Psalm 139. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Not because God doesn't already know, because I don't. My youngest daughter, Taylor, is a screenwriter by trade and also a singer-songwriter. Years ago, she wrote a song called Vulnerable Me. Most of the song is a prayer about not being afraid of what people might see if all the masks do come off and the real person underneath is exposed. One lyric says, "Make me vulnerable, vulnerable me. Make it wonderful to let go completely." But when I listened to it again recently, it wasn't those lines that grabbed me. It was the last line. Throughout the whole song, the prayer is always, don't want to be afraid of what they might see. Then at the very end, the lyric becomes, don't want to be afraid of what I might see in this vulnerable me. That hit me right in the heart, because maybe our greatest fear isn't being seen by other people. Maybe it's finally seeing ourselves. And that realization reminded me of another song I heard recently. It was Amy Grant's new song, The Me That Remains. Near the end of the song, she sings the words, "Be kind." And I thought I knew exactly where she was going. I've heard that message my whole life. Be kind to others, be kind to those who are different, who are struggling. And of course, we should, and I am, but I was thinking, yeah, be kind. But then the lyric continued, be kind to the me that remains. That struck so deep, I inexplicably sobbed. I realized I hadn't been gentle with me. I hadn't been merciful to me. Maybe that's what happens when vulnerability and truth finally meet. First, we become willing to see ourselves, and then we learn how to love what we see. Not because we're perfect, but because God never required perfection before He decided we were worth loving. Sure, every disappointment breaks us. Every loss shapes us. Sometimes we even get wounds and scars. All of that is true, but that's not what moved me about Amy's song, because I don't think the me that remains is talking about what's left over after life gets finished with us. I think it's talking about what's still there. That's a very different thing. Not the remainder, the essence. Not the scraps, the truth. Not what survived life, what life couldn't destroy. See the difference? The message isn't, after all you've been through, here's what's left. The message is, after all you've been through, look what's still here. The image that comes to mind isn't erosion, it's revelation, not subtraction, uncovering. Life has a way of stripping away illusions, false identities, things we thought we needed, and somewhere underneath all that is the person God knew from the beginning. Not the diminished version of you, not the leftovers, not the survivor, the one who was there all along, the one God is still loving, still forming, still restoring, still breathing life into. Maybe that's why the song hit me so hard, because I look at her now, I don't see what's left. I see what's still here. And truthfully, this is the very best version of me I've known so far, and I wish I'd met her sooner. My job while I'm here has always been to be me, and so is yours. Maybe part of maturity is learning to accept and love this person, learning to love all her versions. Maybe that's what I've been trying to say all along. Be who you are, who you've always been, who God knew before you knew, who He was preparing long before you ever took your first breath. Maybe part of that maturity is finally looking at the one who remains and saying, I see you and I love you anyway. Maybe that's why I'd like to have met this version of Susan sooner. Not because she's perfect or because she finally has all the answers. I don't. But she's learning that vulnerability is not weakness, it's honesty. She's learning that being seen is not nearly as frightening as spending a lifetime hiding. She's learning that the person underneath all of the anxiety and the protective layers is not someone to hide. She's someone to tenderly love. And maybe that's why I always remind you, I can see you. Because sometimes all a person needs is someone willing to remind them of what God has never forgotten. forgotten. And here's the invitation for all of us to be vulnerable, to stop demanding perfection before acceptance, to stop postponing whatever until some perfect future version of ourselves finally arrives, and all the while to be kind to the one who remains. Now, as always, I really do wish you could see who God sees when he looks at you. But until you do, I can see you, and I'll see you soon.